I'm still trying to deal with how I was in such panic mode for the past month or so. Absolute panic mode about what was going to happen on November 8th, this past Tuesday. And the more I read some of the less panicked pundits around the print media, excuse me, the more I feel like a total jerkwad. I mean, for real. And, you know, I can't escape the crazy predictions I made and the worry and the concern. All I can say is, it was real. I really felt that way, based on historical precedent about what happens during off-term elections to the administrations that are in power. But I had a loss of faith in the awareness of the American public. Now, some of that is justified for sure. And again, not to make excuses, but part of the loss of faith came with the idea that in the 2020 election, another 70 million people voted for this goddamn maniac, Donald Trump. And another thing that shattered my faith in certainly people here in Georgia is the fact that this foolish, dumb bastard, the football player, was running neck and neck with our sitting senator, and no matter how much truth was put out about Walker, it didn't make any difference in the polling. So, you know, I can find a lot of excuses I can hang my failure to have faith upon. And the Warnock-Herschel Walker contest was one of the main ones. But boy, oh boy, did I get it wrong. Me, someone who said repeatedly that we should not listen to pollsters. And I think that's especially true now. I guess there was a time when the polls were pretty much correct, political polls, in their assessments of where the country stood, generally speaking, or in a political contest. But given the fracturing of media and the fact that there are so many polling companies now, and so many of them are run by either Democrats or Republicans, or these Christian demon organizations who hide their ownership and put out just about anything they want, plus the fact that, as Putin's good buddy said the other day, of course, the Russians have interfered in our elections through social media and will continue to do so. But given all that, boy, I just feel like kind of a jerk. Now, as of yesterday afternoon, the Democrats' control of the U.S. House can't be ruled out completely. There's still a chance. And Democrats are now favored to keep the Senate. My God, if that happens, wow. Now, there's a good chance we're not going to know either of those two outcomes for days, but here's something we do know. The red wave was a red trickle. I mean, it never materialized. In the Senate races, John Fetterman triumphed in PA. Mark Kelly is favored to prevail in Arizona. More than half the votes are counted as of, yesterday afternoon. It's gone up now. I'm always a little bit behind because of my source material. Senator Catherine Cortez Masto trails in Nevada, but outstanding ballots yet to be counted give her a plausible shot. And if Senator Kelly, and I think Mark Kelly is going to retain his seat, if Kelly and Cortez Masto do prevail, without what happens here in Georgia, the Democrats will hold the Senate. But even if only one of them wins, Democrats can keep control by winning this runoff in Georgia in December 6th, I believe. And right now, Raphael Warnock narrowly leads in polling, not punditry, but polling. And in the House, Republicans still haven't secured the 218 wins they need, although they're still narrowly favored to do so statistically. But the red wave, I fully expected it. And again, I base some of my panic and fear on historical counts of what happened. Look what happened during, was it Obama's first term when he lost 50, 60 House seats? George Bush's first term when he lost, 40, 50, Clinton's first term. When, for the first time in decades, the Republicans took control of the legislative branch. So historically, this has happened over and over and over again. So, not looking to copy an excuse, but what the hell? What else were we going to believe? Well, big mistake. There were 5 big media narratives that just went down in flames. And Greg Sargent at the Washington Post points these out for me and consequently for you. First of all, democracy was on the ballot. It was. And for now, it's winning. That's not what I was led to believe. That's not what so many people were led to believe by the pollsters. We've long been told that inflation and crime were the real issues that really mattered. And we were also told that the warnings from the Democratic Party about democracy was going to be destroyed. And you heard a lot of that from me. And that idea of the fate of democracy was not going to motivate voters. That was one of my big fears. It really was. Now, as Greg points out, the precise role of those warnings in driving this Democratic Party overperformance, you might call it, is uncertain. We don't know if it was really a fear of the loss of democracy. But we can already say, can't we, that the orange vomit-fueled election denialism got a kick right in Donald Jesus Trump's balls. Boom. And the voters meaningfully reduced the threat that this MAGA prick poses, and that a lot of commentators bought into. Again, you see my hand up. Sorry. And then you have Democrats winning the governor's races in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, where Republican governors could have certified bullshit presidential electors for a losing Republican candidate, especially 2 years from now. So a big pathway to a stolen 2024 election has been killed in the crib, so to speak. It's been choked off. It's still a concern, but not like it has been. And Greg adds this, quote, and if Kari Lake's gubernatorial bid in Arizona fails, as appears possible, none of the 5 most crucial swing states in the 2020 presidential election would have election-denying governors. Now, Brian Kemp, who defied Trump, as you know, he won here in Georgia. And there's also a real chance that none of these 5 states that carry tremendous power in these presidential elections, none of the 5, will have an election-denying Secretary of State. Oh, good Lord. So, not to hide the fact that dozens of these election-denying pricks did win re-election to the House, it still remains that we, the people, seem to be avoiding a situation where voters failed to hold the most prominent election deniers accountable for the way they flaunted their intentions to subvert democracy. Who is this prick was it Wisconsin, said, when I'm governor, Democrats will never win another election? God damn. And at the bottom of all that rhetorical bullshit from these Christian demons, there was a test, truly a test, of our appetite for authoritarianism, which leads to dictatorship. And if we take a narrow look at it, and not so narrow, that appetite was shown to be horseshit on Tuesday. Yay. Another media-driven narrative that went down in disaster was Kevin McCarthy's dance with the orange vomit. That's been a real disaster. If you remember, just after the Trump-inspired attack on our country, McCarthy privately said that Trump should resign. Then he made a public pilgrimage to Mar-a-Lago to fillet Donald Trump. And after doing that for Trump, he made an agreement with Trump that McCarthy would help cover up Trump's coup attempt for the next 20 months until what happened yesterday, which the little prick did. Now, there was a time during the 2 years, roughly 2 years, that Kevin McCarthy's game was treated in the media as sort of clever. Greg puts it this way. He, McCarthy, was harnessing the energy of the Trump base to retake the House, even as the GOP didn't appear poised to pay any political price for helping place Trump beyond accountability. We'll never know what would have happened if McCarthy had taken the other path, using January 6th to marginalize Trump. But we do know that harnessing Trump's energy failed to produce the decisive rout he had predicted. So, end quote. So now in a kind of a plot twist, the House Republicans who would give Donald Trump a blowjob at noon in the middle of Times Square if asked, they now see McCarthy as, well, Greg calls him a wounded animal. And Punchbowl News reports that even if Republicans win the House majority, the sheer narrowness of that win will make it a lot easier for members of the traitorous, thuggish MAGA caucus to knife McCarthy in the back, which they will do, which would be fitting and karmically correct for a corrupt bastard like McCarthy who made his deal with Satan. You dumb shit. Another idea that crashed and burned was the Democratic Party's meddling, that it wasn't going to work. Oh, yes, it did. Here's what Greg said. When Democrats elevated MAGA Republicans in primaries, believing they would be weaker in the general election opponents, the roar of pundits' criticism was deafening. And that was something I criticized too. Mea culpa, mea culpa. And to be fair, at first it looked prone to backfiring by letting election deniers sneak into office. But it was a bet by the Democratic Party leadership that appears to have paid off. Huffington Post demonstrated that 6 of the most prominent election-denying assholes who were boosted by Democrats in House, Senate, and governor's races were defeated. In other words, the Democrats helped them win their respective primaries, so it'd be easier to shoot the fuckers down, and shot down they were. Yay! Another mistake on my part, or fuck up, call it what you will. Greg says that the critics oversimplified the matter. If you believe the House could pose its most dire threat to democracy simply by being Republican controlled, and you also believe elevating a few election deniers might make the outcome less likely, then it's not entirely a cynical strategy, which is what the Democrats went for. What that strategy was, and this is a part that I refused to see or missed, it was a strategy that risked one outcome, which was adding a few election deniers to the House, to reduce the risk of another, a worse outcome, which was a U.S. House of Representatives under GOP control. Now, that could still happen, but as Greg pointed out, so many of the Republicans in the House, if they do get control, whether they do or not, are these psychotic Marjorie Taylor Greene, Gates fucking monsters. And they're going to make it hell on the Republican Party in the Congress. It's going to be fun to watch. Another idea that was shot down is that the so-called invasion language that was used actually did little for Republicans. If you remember, House Republicans poured enormous sums of money into ads depicting the migrant invasion in the shittiest, typical Christian demon terms. And for the most part in this country, Republicans have enjoyed a presumption of a major advantage on that particular issue. But aside from what Trump used it for in 2016 to get his victory, this idea of an army of invaders coming from our to our southern border has failed to deliver anything except, well, I guess, embarrassment. The border issue was central in the 2018 and 2020 elections, and Republicans lost both. Although they did get some pickups in the House in 2020. Now, some people are going to argue that Democrats neutralized the immigration issue this time by keeping, Biden did this, keeping some of Trump's border policies. And it's also true that the Democratic Party hasn't made a case for its own immigration vision. That better come soon, by the way. But even given that, the Christian demon confidence that Biden's so-called disastrous open border would cause major electoral repudiation of Biden and the election of these Christian demons didn't happen. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. You know, the Progressive Voices Network brings you commercial-free commentary from today's leading progressive radio hosts and pundits, like me, Mike Malloy, 24 hours a day. I'm not your typical old guy from the 80s or the 90s talk radio host, and Progressive Voices is not your typical talk radio network. It's a listener-supported nonprofit with no corporate control whatsoever over our broadcast. So hosts like me, Mike Malloy, are free to rant and scream and carry on about whatever we like. We're often controversial, but we're never boring. Weeknights, 9 p.m. in the East, 6 p.m. in the West on the Progressive Voices Network. Always progressive, always on. I'm Mike Malloy. Keep it lit.